us with truth whene'er we speak. Lord, may we ever know your will. Come to us when our hearts are still, as we your guidance with joy receive. May we as one your bliss achieve, as we your guidance with joy receive. May we as one your bliss achieve.
This is from Whispers from Eternity, which is Master's Book of Prayer Poems. And this one is entitled, Rock Me in the Cradle of All Space. Rocked in the cradle of the blue-colored past, bright-colored present, and dim gray-colored future, I, thy child of eternity, am restless. I strained ineffectually the feet of my power. At last I succeeded in jumping out from duality's cradle of delusion. Thou hast caught me in thy infinite arms to rock me in all space. I am thy babe of eternity, safe now in the cradle of thy omnipresent bosom. This reading is from Rays of the One Light by Swami Kriyananda. These are parallel commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita. This week's reading is an important one, as of course they all are, but this one will resonate. Why do devotees fall? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. An endlessly fascinating question is, why did Judas fall after receiving the extraordinary blessing of being accepted into the inner circle of Jesus Christ's disciples? For Judas was one of the 12 apostles. Yet he betrayed Jesus and earned for himself the opprobrium of Christendom for all futurity for his sin. We find Judas, just in case you are not as familiar with the story, Judas betrayed Jesus to the local authorities, and that's what led to his death and crucifixion. So that's why Judas is, considered, greatest in some ways among sinners. We find Judas reprimanding Jesus just days before that betrayal. Jesus, aware that his disciples would soon be facing, with his death, the supreme tragedy of their lives, allowed Mary to express her devotion by anointing his feet with costly ointment. This act of, quote, wanton waste, as Judas saw it, awakened indignation in that disciple. Why was not this ointment sold for 300 pence and given to the poor? The Bible continues, this he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief, and kept the purse, and bare what was put therein. Then said Jesus, let her alone. Against the day of my burying hath she kept this. For the poor always ye have with you, but me ye have not always. Doubt not the power of delusion. Respect it, indeed fear it, though not in the sense of cowering before it. For as Yogananda said, one is not safe until he attains nirvikalpa samadhi, the state of final union with God. Judas, through attachment to money, opened his consciousness to subtle influences, which may be called satanic, that drew his thoughts toward other related attitudes, the importance of worldly power, for instance, and of worldly influence. The Bhagavad Gita gives a graphic explanation of how easily the mind can be drawn downward once it begins to feed on wrong attitudes. In the 2nd chapter, Sri Krishna states, if one ponders on sense objects, there springs up attraction to them. From attraction grows desire. Desire, impatient for fulfillment, flames to anger. From anger there arises infatuation, the delusion that one object alone is worth clinging to the exclusion of all others. From infatuation ensues forgetfulness of the higher self. From forgetfulness of the self follows degeneration of the discriminative faculty. And when discrimination is lost, there follows the annihilation of one's spiritual life. At the first thought of delusion, Paramahansa Yogananda said, that is the time to stop it. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om. So it's a very important question we're considering today. Why do devotees fall? And you might sort of ask, do we really have to talk about why devotees fall? Can't we just talk about how devotees rise? Well, that's next week. This week we have to talk about why they fall. And again, not to be afraid, but to try to be wise, to be careful. And we have this incredible example before us of Krishna explaining to Arjuna how that falling happens, and then, of course, the example from the life of Jesus in terms of his disciple Judas, who betrayed him. Now, first, though, let's begin from the big picture. We are a soul made from God, and then we've gone out from God because he flung us out and said, good luck and see you eventually, see you soon in his time, which is not soon in our time. And we go out and we have all these experiences, and we have desires and attraction to sense objects and anger and loss of discrimination, and finally we come back to God. So when devotees fall, it doesn't mean they fall and that's it. Some make it and some don't. That's not the story here. Everybody makes it in the end. We have no choice. We live in a reality which is made from duality, and so having come from God, we have no choice but eventually to make the return journey back. So on the one hand, we have nothing to fear, and this is important because someone even asked Swamiji, Swamiji asked Master, can the soul ever be destroyed? Can the soul, in other words also, he may have said, can the soul ever be lost forever? But I think it was phrased in the term of, can the soul ever be destroyed? Or can a soul ever be destroyed? Which may have also meant, can my soul ever be destroyed? Master said, of course not. The soul is a part of God. How could God ever be destroyed? And Swamiji said, I found that answer comforting. So we can never go so far, badder than the baddest of the bad, that then we're finished and stuck. And God says, well, you win some and you lose some, and just etches us out, and that's the end of it. That's not ever going to happen. But it feels like it happens. That's the problem. Because we get into great suffering. Sometimes the suffering is acute, the misery is acute, and we feel like we're lost forever. And I mean that in two ways. When we feel like we're lost forever, then we suffer. Or when we suffer, we feel like we're lost forever. And so, as Swamiji points out, when you're sick, you can't sometimes even remember what it feels like to not be sick. If you've ever been sick for like a day or two, you can't even remember what it's like to be able to breathe properly through your nose, or to not have your head splitting apart. It's just like, I think I've always been this way. And similarly, when we're stuck in delusion or suffering, it's hard to remember what it's like to be happy. what it's like to be calm, what it's like to feel free and joyful, and so on. And so it's important to remember that it's hard to remember, so that when you can't remember that you can't remember. That, oh yes, that's right, I'm in delusion right now, so I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to see the big picture. So I'm going to just turn off my mind. I'm not going to listen to its stupid ramblings anymore because it is ill. And why should I listen to something that's not making sense, that's not speaking the truth? I had this experience once when I was being coached by a friendly relative about my life choices. And some of you have already read between the lines there. And so in between the beatings, I would then go and take a break and sort of rest, and then go back for another round and so on. And then eventually, I would say, oh, excuse me, I have to use the washroom. And I would go to the washroom and just kind of, and try to recover. And then at one point I thought, okay, because it was a lot like being cross-examined on the witness stand in the courts. And so I thought, okay, if he says this, then I'm going to counter with that. And then if he brings up this point, I'm going to be able to bring up this to answer that. And then if he says this about me, I'm going to say, oh yeah, well, what about you? And have this there. And then in this way I can win. And suddenly the thought occurred to me, you are going to lose. Because this relative of mine is so brilliant, very, very intelligent. Perhaps one of the most intelligent people I've ever met. And so, and the battle, of course, is on the basis of logic. Because, no one battles with the heart. The battle is fueled by the heart, but no one ever admits that. They're just saying, no, I'm just being reasonable and rational and logical. And I knew that given his amount of logic, I didn't know, it just occurred to me, look, you're not going to win. So then I thought, well, then what are my options? Is the window open? Maybe I can... But he lived too high up. So I decided I'm going to erect a wall between my brain and my heart. And so no matter how confused my head gets, I'm not going to let that confusion penetrate into my heart. I've never did that before. I've never done it since. And it's not even that I recommend it, but it's just that's what happened. This basically, I know that I'm about to go crazy, and I can't do anything about it, but I'm not going to take that craziness into my heart. In other words, I'm not going to take it fully seriously. And so I went back in anyway, still, like I might win, and just completely got obliterated. And I can go into that story. I have gone into it another time, but it's not relevant for today. And I did. I had that. I came out going, up is down, left is right, north is south. I'm so confused. But I knew it, and I didn't let it into my heart because I knew that it was delusion. It had to be. And so, anyway, that's very important in terms of us to know when we're deluded. To know when we're delirious, to know when we're wrong. How do we know sometimes when we're wrong? I mean, if we think we're wrong, then that's already a good start because we're being cautious. We're saying, what is true? Not am I right or are they right? Of course, they're not right, I'm right. But it's not that. It's just that we're weighing what is true here. And also, not only what is the literal truth or the factual truth, it's not just, the what you say, but the way you say it. So someone can say even something seemingly nice, but they can say it in such a nasty way that, it's what we call a backhanded compliment. Though, like somebody scores really well on an exam and you think, wow, congratulations. I never thought an idiot like you could do so well. And so it's like, it's this backhanded compliment, as we say. And so, again, it may have sort of been true or nice, but it's not actually because of in that case, the words, but also the tone. Just like, congratulations on your promotion that I wanted. You see, it's just that kind of a thing. So, how do we know when we're crazy and we don't know it? What are clues that we're crazy? What are clues that we're in delusion? Because remember, when we're in delusion, we don't think we are. If you think you are, that's a good sign. It means you're probably not as fully into it. It was one friend of ours, two friends of ours who are married were having an argument, and in the middle of the argument, the husband said to the wife, I'm not hooked yet, are you? And she started to laugh, and they just left the argument. Because, but once you get hooked, then it's like, what do you mean I'm hooked? I'm not hooked, I'm right. And you're wrong. We get too into it. So how do we know that we are in delusion? One clue is listen to your own voice. I am not in delusion. All you have to do is listen to your own voice. How does it sound? I am telling you, I am perfectly calm. How does it sound? And just listen also. Even if you're smart enough not to raise your voice, then you go, no, I'm fine. So listen to your own tone of voice. The tone instantly reflects the heart's feelings. Any tension in the heart leads to tension in the voice. You hear it. And so that's one way to self-diagnose. Another is to look in the mirror. And look in the mirror at yourself. And then go, no. Then you can self-diagnose that way. I don't look that way. If you don't have a mirror, then look at the faces of the people around you. And sometimes I figured out that I've stopped making sense, and probably stopped making sense a while ago, when I'm looking around at the faces and they're all kind of like, when everyone looks sort of like they're trapped by you, then you realize, okay, maybe I'm having a problem here. I feel perfectly clear, making no sense, but it feels fine because maybe we're hungry, we haven't eaten in a while, or maybe we stayed up too late, and maybe we said one wrong thing. I once offended a friend of mine so badly by speaking a harsh thing about another friend, which, of course, then I deserved all the karma I got, but I didn't say the name of the other friend. I inserted the name of this friend in my nasty statement. So it made it as clear as that I was saying it about him. When it was like, no, I'm not saying it about you. But then somebody else was right there. And I said, you even said the same thing. And it was not about him, but I didn't say about the correct person. Again, it's a horrible example, but oh well. And I was just like, what's the matter? Why are you so mad? So if somebody comes at you like this, that also might be a clue that we may have misspoken, which was the case in my case. So anyway, these are the clues that we may be off. Another way to know if we are off about an idea is if we can't let it go. It has to be this way. And I'm open-minded as long as it's this way. And then someone says, or even we say to ourselves in an effort to be fair-minded, well, after all, how important is anything in this manifestation of Maya? How many lifetimes have I lived? And so does it really in this moment have to be this way? Yes. If so, then we are in delusion. Because we're attached. We're attached. That's the whole thing. That's infatuation, the desire that this thing alone must be or will bring fulfillment to the exclusion of all others. So if you can't put it down, then you know that you're attached. And if you're attached, it means to that extent you are blinded. And even seeing that helps you to then go, okay, let me take a step back. So in other words, again, I'm not saying these are ways to blame ourselves. These are ways to indications, oh, I'm crazy now. I didn't realize. Because again, crazy people, say, I'm not crazy. You all are crazy. So, another concerned relative of mine thought that he would help me along by taking me to a psychiatrist to get a diagnosis of just how crazy I was. And so he said, I want you to see a doctor. And I said, sure. And later someone said to me, gosh, how did you just agree to that so readily? What if a doctor said you were crazy and then you were put in an institution? And I thought, I hadn't thought of that. But thank God I didn't think of that, because I knew if I said, no, I will not see a doctor, then that's exactly then what crazy people do. And so I said, fine, I will happily see a doctor. So I went, and the relative went with me and explained how if I wasn't seeking money above all to the exclusion of all other things, then that's a mark of someone who's crazy. And so the doctor said, or it's a mark of someone who is incredibly sane. Because he said I was insane. He said, or no, I think he might be incredibly sane. Because if you think about it, there isn't happiness just in money. So then my relative decided that, well, this doctor obviously didn't know anything, and so we went to another doctor anyway. So that as another conclusion, we'll leave it for now. Now, we have to understand the story of Judas properly, because it is so often misrepresented, even in the Bible itself. Judas said, instead of Mary expressing her devotion at the feet of her guru, at the feet of the Lord, which is, of course, a beautiful and very pure thing that she did. And it was very elaborate, and it was very public, and yet this was the last opportunity she was going to have. And think about how she may have felt if she had held back and not done it at that time, and then she never had another chance. So she did act on that and didn't care who thought what of her. But Judas said, why didn't you sell this expensive ointment? It's called spikenard. Why didn't you sell this and then give the money to the poor? Wouldn't that be a holier or sort of more spiritual thing to have done? And it says he cared not for the poor, but he said this because he was a thief. And you think, now how was he a thief? I mean, wouldn't Jesus sort of have like a thief detector at the door, and when Judas came through, it would go off, and then he would say, you're carrying too much gold and too many watches, and you can't be one of my disciples. I mean, how could someone be so elevated to be one of Jesus's 12 direct disciples, and then also be sort of so worldly, so evil, so obviously wrong? And the answer is he wasn't that way. He still made a huge mistake, and so on. There's nothing to defend him from that, although there is a happy ending. I hope to mention it later on if I can remember to. Remind me if I don't. But what Master said, what Yoganandaji said about the whole downfall of Judas, because it doesn't even make sense. Why would he just suddenly turn on Jesus in this way? How could he be a thief? How could he be so evil? And no one noticed? The whole time they were together, nobody sort of, I think there's something wrong with this guy. How could it be? And it wasn't like that. In fact, Master said, I think Swamiji asked Master something along the lines of, was Judas a great soul? And Master said he would have had to have been, to be one of the chosen 12. He would have had to have been. And in fact, I think it was probably written of Jesus' life, meaning predicted, that one of his own would betray him. So somebody had to play that role. And as Jesus himself said, evil, I don't have it exactly right, but evil necessarily there must be. There must be evil. There are these things that just have to happen. But woe to those who act as instruments of evil. Or maybe he says instruments of evil there must be, but woe to those who act as those instruments. In other words, on the one hand, that karma of not necessarily Jesus as a person, but that karma of the big story had to be played out. Somebody had to do it. But still, in other words, we don't want to be the one acting as channels of evil. It has to happen. It will be in the world. But when Satan taps us on the shoulder and said, I could use some help, we say, no thanks. I'm not going to choose to consciously act that way. What does that mean? That means when somebody yells at you, accuses you, betrays you publicly in front of everybody, it might not be a good idea to scream back viciously. You see what I mean? It's not like, someone says steal something. No, I won't steal. Sure, that's easy. But when we're provoked and when we're justified, and the person really deserves it. That's the time when Satan is tapping us on the shoulder, saying, go ahead, just 1-2 combination. No problem. It'll just do a little bit of damage. The damage that hurts, of course, most of all is us, because we've allowed that anger to burn through us and do violence to another person. And so, again, when we lose our cool, don't be too hard on yourself. Because I don't want you to go so far to extreme to say every time I slip, then I've fallen. No, the most important thing is to try to be calm. Be open with our mistakes and to say, okay, I did this. Lord, help me to do better. apologize to the person if you can, if they're still conscious. No, I'm joking. And so, to be fair, to be humble about it when we've made mistakes. We're going to make many more. So it's to not fall does not mean to never make a mistake. You can't get there without making mistakes. If we never make mistakes in our lives, it means we've never stepped out of the comfortable boundary of our own expertise, our own experience. We've just stayed within this one little LKG and saying, quick, ask me, what is 1 + 1? I'll tell you. And that's all we ever do all day long. 1 + 1? What about 2 + 2? 1 + 1. That's what I do. And we never expand or venture forth. We have to. If we're making mistakes, it's a good sign that we're bumping up against our boundaries and expanding them. We're bumping up against our blind spots and blinders and hopefully removing them. So that's good. So as Lahiri Mahashayji said, an easy life is not a victorious life. Remember that. And it's funny, once Haridas Ji in a Sunday satsang said, he said, an easy life is not a victorious life. Or did he say a victorious life is not an easy life? I forget which, meditate on it. And it's like, they both work very well. So, Judas, now going back to his thought, his thinking was, and I'm summarizing it, it's wonderfully written out in The Promise of Immortality, if you have that book by Swamiji, where he explains Judas's descent. I think it might also be in Revelations of Christ, it probably is, but definitely in Promise of Immortality. He talks about how Judas was very much attached to Jesus, but he also was attracted to money and the things that come along with money, which is to say power and status in society. And that Judas was always criticizing Jesus a little bit, saying, offering this correction or that correction, partly in this sense of, do you have to kind of hang out with all these kind of ragtag folks? Because all of his disciples and everybody, they were all humble people. They were, simple Aam Admi type people. They were not very impressive, leaders and high priests and the movers and shakers in the society. And so Judas was saying, it wouldn't hurt you to go to one of those parties in Poe's Garden and just shake a few hands, smile to the people. It wouldn't hurt you to have a few hoardings put up so people could see, who exactly you are and all these things. And you could go to Rashtrapati Bhavan and you could say just hello, just a little bit, just to konjam, give them a little smile. And Jesus would have none of it. And so this was part of this struggle. So finally, Judas, after enough of these things happened, and of course the whole massive karma of the big story was being played out. There was a big drama too. As I said, it wasn't that he was a innocent or helpless pawn in some divine story. He still cooperated with that flow. As I think Master even said, it was the karma that someone played that out, but it was not necessarily Judas's karma that he had to be the one to play that out. In other words, he had a choice. We always have a choice. Now, he decided, so Master explained, to say, I know that Jesus is a great, great soul. I know, he knew. It wasn't that he just thought, he's a wise man who will help us win political power. He said, I knew he is a saint. He might have even felt, I know he's the Son of God, but he won't reveal his glory to people. That's probably another thing. He said, listen, Jesus, if you can just levitate a few feet, it'll really help everybody listen to you. And Jesus wouldn't, although he did many, many miracles, and that's how so many people did follow him. But Judas finally said to himself, I will put my guru in such a situation that he has to reveal his glory. I've asked him, he won't do it, so I will make him do it. And then we can finally get this show on the road. And so that is why he betrayed Jesus to the guards and basically the police who were coming to look for him. And he told them, I will lead you to where he is, and I will kiss the one, because they didn't even know which one he was. I mean, it wasn't that like there was an all points bulletin and Facebook and all these things. Everybody knew what everybody looked like. You didn't have any way of saying who was who. And so he said, the one that I kiss will be the master, so that they would know that's the one who Jesus was. So he did that. He gave the kiss. Everyone knew he was Jesus. They went after him. The story is kind of wonderful. One of the priests sent his servant to grab Jesus, and one of the disciples, or I think it was one of the disciples. Thank you. I guess you know the story. Peter struck the disciple, and his ear came off. I mean, he obviously had a sharp thing. And Jesus restored the ear. He healed the person who was going to be taking him ultimately to his death. He healed the person. And basically for a lot of reasons, and one of which was, look, it's not his fault. Because again, he was the servant of the priest. And again, we can't just say, I was just following orders, so it's not my fault, But still, at the same time, what an act of forgiveness. I mean, to heal someone, not just to say, it's okay, you have another ear. He restored the ear in front of everybody. And what did that make the people who were arresting him think? I saw the ear come up, I heard the scream, I see the blood, I see the ear back on, and the person healed again. Makes you think a bit, Should he be in jail or should I be in jail? Gosh. So anyway, but then what happened? Jesus was surrounded by the police and everything, and what did he do to protect himself? Nothing. He let himself be taken, and Master said this was the outcome that Judas never saw. He never thought that Jesus would fail to defend himself and the other disciples. And Jesus said, if I would, I could call a legion of angels from my Father to come and basically destroy you all. And Master made the comment that if Jesus had done that, which meant if he had considered his body to be reality, if he had considered, let me protect this physical body, that's important, Master said he would have lost God for incarnations. Now, of course, he didn't mean that it was a test for Jesus, that he almost lost God, for he didn't. But he's saying someone in that position, and even us, when we get too close to thinking that, no, this is reality, and I at least have to fight for this, which is to do wrong for the sake of this, then it isn't that we lose God for incarnations, I hope, but we lose God at least in that moment. And so, Judas later, here's another thing to remember. So that's usually where the story ends. Judas did this horrible thing, and he's a big fat jerk, and people even use his name to insult people. You are the Judas of the situation, and all these things. Remember, there's a Judas inside each one of us that's niggling, that's doing what? That's saying, yes, I know the Master is right, but I also think this too. Money isn't so bad, and it isn't so bad, but you can say that in two ways, a right way and a wrong way. There's another thought that creeps in, because remember, Judas was critical of Jesus. He was saying, listen, Master, why wasn't this, even though he was saying it generally, he was also saying it to Jesus. Why are you letting her do this? Why didn't we give this to the poor? Why are you allowing this? And that was another mark. He was willing to be critical of the Guru. He was willing to say, as wise as the Guru is, see how at least in this I am wiser. And we may go, hush, don't say such horrible things, blasphemy. But don't we sometimes think, you hear it? Well, I'm very happy with all this, but, when it comes to computers, I think I might know a thing or two. Or I am, after all, a physician, and so I can explain what actually is going on. It's not completely the way you're describing it. There's a little more to it. Or, have you filed your ITR yet? All these things where we have domain expertise, we can start to creep in and say, well, actually, it's not exactly, for your sake, fine, but I know better. That's what we have to watch out for. It doesn't mean we mindlessly say, you are always right, whatever you say. We're allowed to question, but with a desire to understand and accept and listen. Not just you can mindlessly question, or you can thoughtfully question. A thoughtful question is interested in the answer. A mindless question is just interested in the question. And similarly, Swamiji said there's positive doubt and negative doubt, or I think Master did too. Positive doubt is questioning, wanting to, knowing that there is an answer, knowing that there is a truth. And negative doubt is questioning, saying, and there is no answer and there is no truth. Or it's whatever I have already said. And so we have to watch for these. So again, I'm saying this just so we don't get on our high horse about Judas and say, oh, what a mistake that was. And if it doesn't make sense to you yet, just imagine if it happened to Yogananda. It's all you have to do is replace Jesus, who you might or may not have a deep connection with Master. And just imagine if it did happen to Master, and in some ways it did. Not so dramatically. And then, wouldn't you just feel, how could someone have done that to my Master? And suddenly, it's like, forget the ear, let's take the whole head off. Because it's like, that's my guru you're talking about. Anyway, I may have to edit this video before publishing it. Strike the broadcast, yeah. Turn the microphone off. Anyway, so the thing, what happened to Judas afterwards? He went, he went to the priests who said, thank you for betraying his guru, and they threw him how much silver? 30 pieces of silver. Which just made it even worse. Here's your payment for betraying your guru, and now he's going to be killed. Thanks. And he was miserable. He didn't say, oh, thanks, that's what I expected. That's the other thing to say. If Judas was so bad, then why did he kill himself afterwards? He killed himself. So obviously, things did not go according to plan. First I'll betray my guru, then I'll kill myself. Sounds good. What's for breakfast? Nobody plans it like that. He was horrified at the way... Sorry. He was... it's a horrible thing. Anyway, he was horrified at the way things had gone. He was horrified. So we know it didn't go according to the way he had planned. This is how we can infer, but then Master's there to explain us this is how it was. Thank God. So we know exactly the truth. But then, even that, someone asked Master... basically about Judas, and Master said Judas, first of all, should not have killed himself. He said he did a horrible thing, but once done, it's done. Then that karma is with him. And so he should, he said, have retired into a secluded place, he may have even said the mountains, and just meditated. Done penance, meditated with apology, meditated with penitence, regret, with, I did a very bad thing, now what can I do to make up for it? You can't do anything now physically, but at least you can meditate. So again, when we think we've done this horrible thing that's so unforgivable, if Judas should have gone to the mountains and meditated, and I assure you, whatever you've done, that was worse. What Judas did was much worse, and even he should have just gone and meditated and tried to have done better. So don't blame yourself, don't put yourself through horrible things, most of which are horrible thoughts. Don't bathe yourself in an acid bath of self-hatred or anger or anything. Just say, even Judas should have just gotten back into his spine, meditated, prayed for forgiveness. The karma's going to come anyway. Why add to it with all of this other stuff? And then the other thing Master said is Judas he had to suffer for 2,000 years for that. Probably in some astral hell or something like that. But then Master said he was reborn, and I met him in this lifetime. He said he was a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, and that he was in fact liberated in this lifetime. He was still a little attached to money, and some of the other disciples teased him, what are you caring about the money? And Ramakrishna said, don't. As if to say, he's suffered quite enough for that. Just let him alone. And he is now liberated. He's free. So that's the story. Judas is did his thing, paid his penance, and he's out. He's freer than we are. He's a saint now. I wouldn't call him Saint Judas. I'm sure he picked a different name this time. You wouldn't really want that, to carry that around with you. But he's a saint now. So his story, his mistake, his horrible thing, horrible misunderstanding for the guru, against the guru, which on the spiritual path, for those of us who have a guru and love him, in some ways feels like that could be the worst, because you've betrayed that which to you is most precious, because the guru is the one who leads you out. And if you've hurt him, wow. And he's the one who did that. Judas is free now. So remember that. The one who Master said betrayed him as Judas had done in a certain way. He said he will be free in 3 more lifetimes. 3 more. He didn't say 3 as long as he doesn't ever do it again. He just said 3. Period. And then you start to wonder, yes, but how? But what if he makes another? It's nope, 3. He's going to be free in 3 more lifetimes. He added that the first 2 lifetimes will be miserable. And he said, and the last lifetime will be miserable up to the end. So if you're having a bad day, you can say, oh, maybe that's me. I'm going to be miserable up to the end, and then I'm going to be free. Master, maybe? No, better to just try to get out of the misery now. But the point is, nothing is so unforgivable. We have to pay our karma, but we don't have to pay more than that. So don't be hard on yourself. Be encouraging to yourself. Whatever you've done, it's in the past. Remember, as Sri Yukteswarji said, forget the past. The vanished lives of all men are dark with many shames. Human conduct is ever unreliable until anchored in the infinite. Ever unreliable. Unreliable means unreliable. I wanted to do good. I promised to do good. I made a vow to do good. I even tied my hands so that I wouldn't do bad to that person. And then, bang! I couldn't help it. Human conduct is ever unreliable until anchored in the infinite. Everything in future will improve if you are making a spiritual effort now. God bless you.